Alright, this isn't my typical content, so it's not going to be a long one, but I saw this clip and I couldn't not respond to it because it's so aggressively stupid. It's a clip of right-wing grifter and benzo addict Jordan Peterson on BBC Question Time, which is like a news politics panel show where they get various talking heads on to discuss current affairs. And the thing they're talking about here is the affair of Azeem Rafiq, a Pakistani-born cricket player for the Yorkshire Cricket Club. The relevant context here is that he was driven to despair by various racist incidents on and off the pitch, from senior players, fans, and institutional figures in his cricket club. The England and Wales Cricket Board then investigated and ultimately concluded there was no real evidence of structural racism, but then details of their report leaked, and it includes examples such as other players using racial slurs towards Rafiq and then claiming it wasn't racist, just banter. But we're not going to be talking about that specifically, rather we're going to be talking about Jordan Peterson's response to it on BBC Question Time. Because in this 2-minute clip of characteristically nonsensical word salad, Jordan Peterson says a few of the dumbest things I've heard him say in a while, and that's saying something.
Things need to be particularized rather than generalized. As a general rule, let's say, this cricket player was facing racism. The question is who, when, what, exactly? Because otherwise it degenerates into something like a discussion of structural racism. And when it becomes abstracted up to that level, first of all, that pits group against group, which I think is entirely counterproductive. And it actually doesn't address the issue.
So here we see Peterson beginning by making a general point against the making of general points. And if that sounds ironic, or hypocritical, or suggestive of a mind-blowing lack of self-awareness, yeah, it is, but it only gets worse.
Racism is a global and vague term.
Sorry, but why would you possibly do that? What did that mean?
Sure, racism isn't a specific term in the same way that something like bronchitis is, but no one's pretending otherwise. Generally, and indeed in this context, it's very clearly used to organize discussion of smaller, more discrete acts like use of slurs or harassment. But the vagueness of the word racism is appropriate here because the discussion isn't just on these specific individual acts, it's on the climate of a place like the Yorkshire Cricket Club, which allows and magnifies them. That's the sort of thing structural racism refers to. A system or institution which, by virtue of not caring enough to stop or punish these individual discrete racisms, slurs and harassments, allows a culture, a more vague and holistic racism to flourish. But we're going to move on now, partially because, to their credit, the rest of the panelists sort of pounce on Peterson's nonsensical objections to the notion of racism.
Because I said it was a global and vague term.
The inverted commas as if it's not a real thing.
No, that isn't what it meant.
Well, what did it mean then? Explain.
It meant that it's indicative of low-resolution thinking. We use all these terms frequently in discussions like this that are containers of undifferentiated content.
This here is one of the major ironies of the piece. When Peterson refers to low-resolution thinking and containers of undifferentiated content and complains about abstractions and over-abstractions, he's very clearly doing the exact thing he claims to be against. That is, taking individual points, be them examples of racism or argumentative strategies, and approaching them not as they are, but as indicative of larger flaws. In this case, it's Peterson trying to criticize what his co-hosts are saying. So he's avoiding questions of structural racism by shifting the topic of the conversation entirely to highly abstracted questions of argumentative structure. What's more, he seems flabbergasted when this doesn't work, when the rest of the guests are more concerned about talking about this question of racism and structural racism than they are about low-resolution thought.
Repeatedly called abusive terms directly linked to his ethnicity.
By who?
By not just one, but repeated members of the Yorkshire Cricket Club. He's had people contacted him. If it walks like a duck, Jordan, talks like a duck, it's a duck. It's racism.
What I asked was exactly who and when, and you just answered that
Yes.
question. So I would say those specific people should be held specifically to account for their actions before any movement up the abstraction hierarchy to a discussion of something like structural racism, which I don't think is helpful.
Watching this, it seems clear, to me at least, that Jordan Peterson doesn't put much stock in the existence of any form of structural racism. Or at the very least, he is entirely reluctant to talk about or address it at all. Because while the other guests see in the matter of Rafiq a web of interconnected people and systems which propagated and permitted repeated racial abuse, Jordan Peterson only sees individuals, only sees specific discrete acts of harassment, and even then he seems reluctant to admit they happened at all. Peterson wants us to address only these individuals, and not the structures they existed and acted within, or the structures which led them to think what they were saying and doing was okay. And I think the key to understanding why Peterson is saying these things and why he believes what he believes can be seen in this PragerU video from a few years back. To be clear, please don't watch this, it's nonsense, and just don't give them the clicks, but I'll show you a snippet, because it's quite enlightening as to Peterson's general worldview.
The proper way to fix the world isn't to fix the world. There's no reason to assume that you're even up to such a task, but you can fix yourself.
Peterson's world, then, is a world of individuals who have ultimate power within their own lives and aren't held back by structures and systems. Peterson believes that before trying to fix the world, people should fix themselves. This is, of course, despite Peterson's own well-documented major problems. They don't stop him from going out and trying to remold society into a system of passive individuals who focus solely on themselves, though. And that, as much as anything else, should clue you into the fact that Peterson isn't saying this in good faith. It's a tactic to shut down discussion and disruption. "Oh," says Peterson to the climate change protester, "you're trying to pass a carbon tax? Well, your room's messy, so I don't care, and nor should anyone else." And I think the reason Peterson does this is because the world doesn't need changing to him. His society, at least, is fundamentally fair because it allows his individuals, his perfect little homunculi, to be themselves and fix their own worlds and wield ultimate individual power. In Peterson's worldview, systems and structures of oppression, the ones his hypothetical protesters are fighting against, and the ones which drove Azim Rafiq to the door of suicide, they don't exist. So people shouldn't try and address them. People shouldn't talk about structural racism. They should find the racists and stop them, if they exist. The core of the problem is Peterson's personal philosophy, his vision of the West as a society in which people can sort their lives out, can exert ultimate control over their own surroundings. This worldview does not permit the existence of systematic oppression, because if it did, that would mean people wouldn't be able to sort their own house out before trying to change the world. They'd have to change the world first before they could fix their own life. And that's not allowed. So that's why we see Peterson using this tactic to try and shut down discussion on question time. But the good thing is, for once, other people in the room see it for what it is: nonsense, charlatanry. And my favourite part, the bit which makes this to me the dumbest thing Jordan Peterson has said in a while, is the way that his whole argument for specificity against abstraction is the most abstract word salad nonsense I've heard in months. Look, I'm not naive enough to think this is gonna get many views. It's not really my typical content, but I hope that if you have watched it, you've enjoyed my little unscripted vent about this pillock and the idiot words that fall out of his mouth. So yeah, thanks for watching, and see you soon.